It is rumored that the person in power of the Bo family, Bo Shaojin, has a pure heart and few desires. He acts arbitrarily and authoritatively, with no one daring to provoke him except in the inner circle of his eyes. Late that night, cousin Bo Cheng brought back a stunning girl with doting eyes and introduced her, "Brother, this is my girlfriend." Bo Shaojin stared deeply at his cousin's girlfriend. The girl was fair and delicate, looking at him timidly. "When we meet again." Bo Shaojin didn't expect it, so she stood in her own bathroom, her face full of panic, trembling with fear, her eyes facing each other, her red eyes as if she was about to cry. The night he learned that an Ian and his cousin were just pretending to be lovers, it was difficult for Bo Shaojin to suppress his thoughts. After getting drunk all night, he headed straight to An Yin's dormitory. She was frightened by her timidity, and the man wiped away the tears from the corners of her eyes. His tone was not as soft as his, "Be good, don't be afraid. I won't touch you." Keywords of the novel. Jiao Jiao Guai. Bo Yi is paranoid and difficult to control, with no pop-ups, delicate and obedient. Bo Yi is paranoid and difficult to control. Download the complete set of TXT, You Are So Cute and Obedient. Bo Yi is paranoid and difficult to control. Latest chapter reading. Chapter 1. Wants to be an actor. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1 Wants to be an actor. T-City, just after a heavy downpour, the already dim sky became even darker with the heavy rain. In front of the apartment door, An Ian followed closely behind Bo Cheng, looking embarrassed and uneasy. "Can you relax a bit?" After lightly pressing the doorbell, Bo Cheng glanced at her and couldn't help but complain. "But An Ian is not a girl who is good at lying. I'm afraid I'll expose myself." "Just remember what I told you before," Bo Cheng warned. An Ian lowered her eyes and answered with a lack of confidence. The door slowly opens. An Yin's heart was pounding. Lowering her head, she didn't notice the icy atmosphere around her. "Brother." Bo Cheng grinned with a hint of flattery, affectionately addressing the man who came to open the door. The man was wearing a black suit, with clear lines on his resolute face. His lips pursed tightly, making his expression appear cold and handsome. "Come in," the man's deep voice rang out. The man did not show much surprise at his cousin's visit, and his gaze only lingered for a second on the girl who lowered her head and remained silent. An Ian was slightly stunned. In the moment she looked up, she could only see the tall figure of the man walking towards the room. At the door, Bo Cheng turned his head and whispered, "Change your shoes." Those who know Bo Shaojin know that he has a serious cleanliness obsession. Oh, An Ian obediently followed suit, but her movements appeared very awkward. After changing her shoes, An Ian followed behind Bo Cheng with a thud, afraid of making mistakes. The man stood by the coffee table, his eyes as deep as a cold pond, staring closely at the girl next to Bo Cheng. An Ian could feel a gaze falling on her, and she nervously swallowed a small mouthful of saliva, never daring to look up. "Brother, this is my girlfriend, An Ian." After reading the name, Bo Cheng realized he had made a mistake. An Ian turned her head and stared at Bo Cheng in surprise. Didn't they discuss using the name Jiang Kiki before? Bo Cheng gave her an apologetic look and then spoke up, "Call me brother quickly." In fact, Bo Cheng was so nervous that his mouth twitched. An Ian said, "Brother." When she spoke, her voice was as pleasant as a tender warbler, and it was like a soft and sticky candy cake, sweet and crispy. What is even more striking is her appearance, which is as delicate as a person in a painting, with a refined and gentle expression. After speaking, she lifted her head and her gaze collided with the man, meeting a pair of calm and profound eyes like the sea. The man's facial features are three-dimensional, highlighting his extraordinary coldness and handsomeness. He is dressed in a black suit, fitting his tall and burly figure. Moreover, he exuded a fierce aura that made people dare not look directly at him. An Ian quickly lowered her eyes. "What to drink?" Bo Shaojin withdrew his gaze and did not respond much to her brother voice. The girl looked at her coquettishly and glanced at herself, too timid. If this kind of person lives in a thin family, they will be devoured and stripped to the point where there are no bones left. However, Bo Cheng's girlfriend has changed frequently, so there's no need to worry. Bo Shaojin put away his thoughts. Brother, just leave this small matter to me, you sit down. After flattering like a dog's leg, Bo Cheng ran towards the kitchen with familiarity. Anine left a bewildered expression on her face. Bo Shaojin was already sitting lazily on the sofa. His eyebrows furrowed slightly, his whole face turned cold, and he glanced at her. Sit down. His voice sounded slightly low, exuding a rare sense of stability and competence. At this moment, there were only the two of them in the living room, and these words were clearly meant for her. Okay, Anine nervously moved her steps and sat down on the sofa more than 2 meters away from the man. The air was filled with an awkward atmosphere. Bo Shaojin rarely interacts with girls, especially those who look timid and delicate, and threaten her with every word she says. The sunlight penetrates the French window and shines into the room. A ray of light shines on her beautiful face. She wears a pair of tight jeans and a slightly loose white sweater, which makes her as thin as a willow. Her beauty has no aggressiveness, and even naturally generates a sense of protection, giving people the feeling of a fairy who is not stained with dust. Bo Shaojin withdrew his gaze, with a faint distance between his eyebrows and eyes. Just as Anine was feeling uneasy, Bo Cheng happened to appear. Take a sip of water. Bo Cheng handed the teacup to her as he spoke. Thank you, Aninka said. Seeing the unfamiliar way of getting along between them, Bo Shaojin looked indifferent. Brother, I brought Anine here today to ask you something, Bo Cheng said directly, but when he mentioned the name of his girlfriend, he was a bit awkward. Bo Shaojin and Bo Cheng's father are biological brothers. For so many years, Bo Cheng has been living under the shadow of Bo Shaojin, being compared and criticized, and Bo Cheng has become accustomed to it. Bo Shaojin is the eldest son of the Bo family, who has been highly regarded since childhood, and is also a business genius praised by his elders. Some people are destined to be extraordinary from birth. And Bo Shaojin is this kind of person. When he was a child, Bo Cheng quite disliked the cousin Bo Shaojin. No matter where he went, he couldn't escape the title of Bo Shaojin's cousin. It seems like he doesn't have a name. In recent years, he has gradually improved his view of this cousin. After all, Bo Shaojin's talent in business is enough to dispel anyone's doubts. Speak up. Bo Shaojin spoke calmly. His forehead drooped casually, half covered with a pair of cold and sparkling stars like a cold pond. This cousin has been fond of causing trouble since childhood. Bo Shaojin has also cleaned up the mess for him. Anine blinked her sparkling eyes, staring at her own toes to reduce her presence. In fact, she kept reminding herself in her heart that she was just a fake girlfriend, fake under great pressure. Bo Cheng didn't notice Anine's nervousness at all, so he said, Brother, your friend has opened a film and television company. At this point, Bo Cheng paused. Seeing that Bo Shaojin didn't respond, he could only smile dryly, and then went on to say, I heard that the other party is recruiting female supporting role in a play, and I want my girlfriend to try it. After speaking, Bo Cheng stared at his cousin with an expectant expression on his face. Bo Shaojin is over 1.8 meters tall. Despite sitting there, his every move exudes an indescribable aura of nobility. Do you want to be an actor? Bo Shaojin's lips curved slightly, with a faint mist-like smile. He did not directly answer Bo Cheng, but instead focused his gaze on Anine, who lowered his head and remained silent. Bo Shaojin rarely smiles, occasionally bending his lips, but giving people a cool, thin, and refreshing look. Anine only wanted to go back to school quickly and didn't notice the situation around her until Bo Cheng reached out and patted her arm, reminding her, Tell my brother, you want to act. Posting a new article, if you like it, let me know and I will work hard to update it. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. I will do my best. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. I will do my best. During his speech, Bo Cheng turned his head and, as Shaojin couldn't see his facial expression, his almost pleading gaze fixed on an Yin. He muttered, "Help Coco." Jiang Kiki, Bo Cheng's true girlfriend, is also an Yin's best friend. In fact, the reason why an Yin agreed to play Bo Cheng's fake girlfriend this time was completely unexpected. Before Bo Cheng and Jiang Kiki left, Jiang Kiki suddenly had a stomachache and begged his good friend An Yin to replace him and his boyfriend to meet Bo Shaojin. An Yin withdrew her thoughts and came into contact with Bo Cheng's pleading gaze. Moo Moo replied with a wooden tone, "I want to." After Bo Cheng and An Yin left the apartment, they finally came to their senses. He never dreamed that Bo Shaojin would agree to his request without hesitation. And in An Yin's mind, she still remembered the scene just now. The man stared at her with black eyes for a long time, and a cold and deep male voice gently entered his ear, "I'll do my best." It's so close. Bo Cheng let out a long sigh and patted his chest, looking like he had survived a disaster. Coincidentally, his phone rang and he answered it without thinking. "Coco, this matter has been done." Compared to Bo Cheng's joy, An Yin appears much more dull. Only she knew that the sense of oppression that man gave was still her heart pounding wildly couldn't calm down. On the way back to school, Bo Cheng kept talking to Jiang Kiki on the phone. An Yin doesn't mind seeing strange things. After realizing it later, she realized that the man had never introduced himself from beginning to end, so she went around someone else's house and didn't even know their name. With this in mind, An Yin sneered at herself. They live in top-notch luxury apartments, and those who can live there are either wealthy or wealthy. Therefore, how could such a noble young man possibly have any interaction with them in the future? Inside the apartment, Bo Shaojin held a glass of wine with his fingertips and gently shook it. The white wine slid along the edge of the glass, leaving a mark. The next second, he drank it all in one gulp, his Adam's apple rolling slightly, and he finished all the wine in his mouth. Recalling the girl timidly calling him "brother" just now, Bo Shaojin sneered coldly. He walked up to the coffee table, picked up his phone, and directly dialed a number. After 2 rings, the other side was connected, and a lazy voice rang out, "Rare guest, how could Bo Shao personally call me?" Sunan joked. Bo Shaojin sat on the sofa with his phone in hand, his eyes gloomy. "I heard you have a new film to start filming." Sunan's heart tightened and he cautiously probed, "Today, the sun is shining in the west, and he is actually starting to care about my work. Why, do you want to enter the film and television industry?" Sunan only said that Bo Shaojin's mind is unpredictable, and he always keeps a secret about what projects he invests in. When he earns a lot of money, everyone finally calms down. This person is good at plotting. Be on guard. "I'm not interested in investing in the entertainment industry," said Bo Shaojin with a faint voice. Sunan finally let go of his suspended heart. "I remember the identity of that girl on my end, and in order to save some unnecessary trouble," Bo Shaojin frowned and put down a sentence. "A relative wants to audition for the female supporting role in your new play." Bo Shaojin helped people through the back door. Sunan bounced up from the bed on the other end of the phone, and her sleeping companion beside her was startled. She couldn't help but mutter, "Disgusting, it scared me." Before she could finish speaking, Sunan covered her mouth. Upon hearing the woman's moans, Bo Shaojin's face gradually turned black. He has never commented on Sunan's private life. On the other side, Sunan quickly stood up with his phone and ran to the balcony. He glanced at the phone still on the phone and exclaimed incredulously, "Did Bo Shao even have a day helping people through the back door?" Bo Shaojin kept saying that he was helping his relatives, but Sunan was not foolish. He seemed to smell a hint of adultery. Here's a sentence. Bo Shaojin didn't want to talk too much to him, and his tone was impatient. "This is your first time coming to me for business, how can I not give you face, but..." Sunan said, pausing for a moment and teasing, that girl. Before the Sunan dialect could be finished, it was interrupted by Bo Shaojin. I gave your phone number to the other party, and she will contact you then. Then, over the phone came, Doodle. I'll help you when I'm done, right? Sunan couldn't help but complain as he watched the phone hang up. Angry, he actually started looking forward to meeting Bo Xiao's so-called relative. God knows, Bo Shaojin is notorious for being unfriendly and selfless. He is willing to help others this time. Sunan has lived for most of his life and this is the first time he has seen him. If something goes wrong, there must be demons. After returning to the dormitory, Anin looked as if she had lingering palpitations. Jiang Kiki welcomed his good friend with a joyful expression on his face. I knew there was nothing you couldn't do. Jiang Kiki's beautiful figure stood at the gate, and her short shoulder-length hair accentuated her beauty. Anin came to the desk and sat down before feeling secure. Isn't your stomach hurting? Anin turned her head and landed on Jiang Kiki. Jiang Kiki was momentarily speechless. I didn't expect Anin, who was usually confused, to suddenly become so shrewd. Jiang Kiki dared not look back at her and stuttered, I'm sorry, I actually pretended to be sick before. After saying these words, Jiang Kiki felt much more at ease. Anin looked up in shock. It's all Ah Cheng's fault. He always talks to me about how terrifying his cousin is, Jiang Kiki complained with a drooping face and lingering palpitations. So, when I was about to leave, I backed down, but I was afraid of losing this opportunity to become an actor, so I wanted you to replace me. Jiang Kiki blushed and spat out the last few words. After speaking, she lowered her head and dared not look at her best friend's face. Although Anin usually looks soft, weak, and easy to bully, Jiang Kiki is very aware that Anin is sulking and the consequences are very serious. She can ignore people for a lifetime. Stubborn. Anin looked up and down at Jiang Kiki with a pair of gloomy eyes, then froze for a moment before slowly spitting out, let's not do it again. Don't worry, there will never be another time. Jiang Kiki made a vow. At this moment, Anyin's phone suddenly shook. She clicked on it, it was a message sent by Anne's mother. Come home early after class. Mom made your favorite spicy fish. Anin relied on her mother since she was young, and in her impression, there was no memory of her father. As she grew up, she also realized that she was a child without a father. After becoming mature, she did not bring up any topics about her father in front of her mother. I don't dare to ask, not only because I'm afraid my mother will be sad, but also because I'm afraid of the outcome that will disappoint her. Anin quickly replied with 2 words, okay. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Mom and you are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Mom and Anin looked at Jiang Kiki and said, after class in the afternoon, I'll go home. Jiang Kiki snorted and responded, holding her phone in her hand. She was chatting passionately with Bo Cheng, and the dialogue box was always filled with the words, typing. After seeing it, Anin naturally moved her eyes as if she had become accustomed to eating this bowl of dog food. Anin is currently in her 3rd year of college and her coursework is relatively easy. Class ends at 4:30 p.m. sharp. After greeting Anin and Jiang Kiki, they rushed out of school carrying their bags. She attended T University, which is a bit far from home. She rushed to the bus stop as soon as she left the school gate and got on the bus. Arrive at the bus station and transfer again. On both sides of the road, there is a bustling atmosphere, with tall buildings rising from the ground and soaring into the clouds. And Anyin's home, on the other hand, has to walk along the alley she is currently walking in, about 500 meters into the old city area filled with the smell of fireworks. The old city area is old and mottled, with bumpy roads, but it excels in its liveliness. On both sides of the alley, various small shops and snack shops were placed one by one. At the end of the workday, there was a bustling crowd, but it was filled with the atmosphere of human fireworks. This area is all 6-story old buildings, and her family lives on the top floor. Anine didn't go home immediately, but went straight to a bookstore downstairs, which was owned by Anne's mother. Over the years, Anne's mother has relied on running this bookstore to support the mother and daughter, which is really not easy. Before one foot could even step into the bookstore, Yin's delicate and gentle voice rang out. "Mom!" At this moment, a woman walked out from behind rows of bookshelf frames, with a smile on her face. Yin has come back. Anne's mother has a slender figure, dressed in a light white qipao, like a blooming white lotus, dignified and beautiful, spotless. A typical Jiangnan woman's posture. Despite approaching the age of 40, time seemed to have left no trace on her face, only adding a touch of mature feminine charm to her, delicate yet not alluring, charming yet not vulgar. Anine came to Anne's mother's side and began sorting out the messy books on the bookshelf, not forgetting to complain, "It's already 7 o'clock in the evening, everyone is out for dinner, and we haven't finished dinner yet." Actually, Anine just doesn't want her mother to work so hard every day. It would be great to leave work early. Many bookstores on this street close at 6 p.m., but Anne's mother always stays up until 8 or 9 p.m. Sometimes when there are too many customers and Anne's mother is busy, she forgets to eat. This kind of thing happens from time to time, and Anine is very distressed. Once, while attending school, Anine suddenly received a phone call from her mother, who claimed to be a doctor and said that her mother was undergoing surgery in the hospital. That was the time when Anine was so scared that she was completely disoriented and had the thought of fear for the first time. From then on, she will often go home and pay attention to Anne's mother's physical condition, not allowing her to overwork. After all, in her world, only Mom is left. Their mother-daughter relationship of relying on each other is incomprehensible to anyone. "I know you're greedy, how dare I starve you?" Anne's mother's light laughter, accompanied by her soft voice, reminded me of the crisp bird song, gentle and beautiful. To be a person, one must eat, and only then can one's ideological consciousness keep up. Anine responded with a smile. Anne's mother shook her head helplessly, her face full of indulgence. Where did that come from? Anine followed behind her mother, and after organizing the books, Anne's mother locked the door. The sky outside has gradually turned dark. The street lights flicker and go off, making people's eyes sore and painful. This street lamp has been broken for so long, why hasn't anyone repaired it? Anine couldn't help but mutter. As Anine spoke, she couldn't help but step forward and embrace her mother's arm, exuding a silly and coquettish demeanor. "Eating carrots salty and worrying lightly is something we should manage," Anne's mother scolded. Along the way, the mother and daughter chatted casually. Little did they know that their beautiful faces came gracefully, with graceful steps and graceful postures, causing passers-by to glance and stop. Old-style buildings without elevators. After climbing the 6th floor, both of them were panting and their faces were flushed. Finally returning home, Anine ran straight to the bedroom, collapsed on the bed, and shouted towards the door, "Mom, you need to rest for a while. It's not too late to cook later." Anine is mainly worried about her mother's health and doesn't want her to be too tired. Anne's mother wouldn't listen to her daughter's words. The first thing she does when she gets home is to go to the kitchen and get busy. In half an hour, the narrow room was filled with the fragrance of food. Dinner consists of simple dumplings and spicy fish. Mom has always been frugal in her cooking, not extravagant or wasteful. Fortunately, Anine is not picky about food and is easy to support. During the meal, Anne's mother watched her daughter eat with relish and secretly hid the sadness in her eyes. She quickly cleared up her emotions and said, "Mom signed up for a group tour, a 7-day trip to Yunnan, and will depart in 2 days." Yin's eating gesture froze as she lifted her head, her face full of disbelief. Really? From childhood to adulthood, not only did Mama go on a trip, but she even went shopping when Anine had no clothes to wear. At this moment, Anne's mother said she was going on a trip, and Yin's first reaction was not joy, but more confusion, always feeling that something was wrong with her mother. Anne's mother picked up a bowl, took a sip of soup, covered up her unnatural expression with the bowl, and muttered, "Of course it's true. Don't you support Mom going?" "Of course I support it." Anne replied without hesitation. Anne wished her mother could rest more. "That's good." Anne's mother put down her bowl, her eyes flickering with a hint of melancholy. "Don't be too frugal at school. Eat and dress warmly, do you hear me?" "Got it." Anne put a piece of fish into Anne's mother's bowl and then spoke, "You're going out to play this time. If you see something you like, buy more. Don't be reluctant to pay." Yin's words were slightly sour. From childhood to adulthood, Anne's mother has been living very frugally to support her. She never goes to the hospital, even for colds and the like, just to save on a little medical expenses. There are countless similar things. Anne's mother looked relieved. "Has my daughter grown up?" And she can't drag down her daughter. In fact, the so-called 7-day tour in Yunnan is just a cover. A few days ago, she was not feeling well. After going to the hospital for examination, she was diagnosed with early breast cancer. At the moment she heard the result, she didn't recover for a moment. What she thought most was, what would Ying do if she had an unexpected situation? She couldn't let her daughter live alone, and she deeply experienced the feeling. She will never allow her daughter to repeat her life. Finally, with the doctor's advice, the surgery time was determined, which is 2 days later. Before that, she needs to explain some things clearly. Anne had a very happy meal and didn't notice anything unusual about her mother. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Surgery. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Surgery. Despite Anne's heavy worries, her face did not show any signs. Anne was rushing to wash the dishes, while Anne's mother couldn't help but take her daughter and looked at her with pity as she carried the dishes to the kitchen. Since childhood, Anne has been more sensible than other children, with an introverted and gentle temperament. Despite encountering grievances in life, she dare not express them openly, fearing to cause trouble for her mother. All of this, Anne's mother saw it in her eyes. If a daughter had not lost her fatherly love since childhood, her personality would not have been so cowardly. "It's all my fault." So, she felt that she owed her daughter too much. She must recover soon and spend more time with her daughter, longer. But if this surgery fails, then Mom sat at the dining table with lowered eyes and a hint of sadness on her face. The next second, Mom returned to the bedroom, opened the drawer of the bedside table, and dug out an old box from inside. As I held the box in my hands, my gaze gradually became deep and affectionate. She cautiously reached out a hand and wanted to open the box, but when she unlocked it, she stopped. Quickly putting the box back into the drawer, Anne's mother lost control and walked to the window. The gentle breeze blew by, cooling her restless heart. The night outside the window gradually darkened, and a ray of moonlight shone indoors, landing on Mama's graceful body, as if giving people an ethereal feeling of a beautiful woman leaving the world and independent. The 2-day holiday will soon pass. Anne left home and returned to school under the reluctant gaze of Anne's mother. This vacation, she felt like her mother had become more talkative. "For 2 days at home, my mother always reminds me of some trivial things in life. Before leaving, she even asks me to keep a key." Anne's mother's original words are, "As I get older, I always forget things." When Anne took the key, she didn't think much. She knew from a young age that her mother had a precious box placed on the bedside table. Shaking her head, Anne stopped herself from continuing to daydream. Perhaps Mom just wants to help her keep this key by herself. Anne sat in the bumpy car, holding a key in her fair palm. Then, she carefully placed it in her backpack to prevent losing it. Time passes by bit, and it looks like it's getting dark. On the roadside, more than 10 people stood whispering and bustling. One of the middle-aged men shouted loudly, "When are we going to wait?" Uncle's voice was rough and particularly fierce. The driver quickly nodded, bowed, and stepped forward to comfort him, offering cigarettes and apologizing, with a stiff smile on his face. Ian stood quietly by the roadside, creating a strong contrast with others. "It's really unlucky." Ian let out a light sigh. The bus unexpectedly had a flat tire halfway through the journey, but fortunately the driver reacted quickly and no one was injured on board, except for the delay in returning to school. "Everyone, the car sent to pick you up is almost here. Please continue to wait for a while, I'm really sorry." The driver stood in the middle of the crowd, his tone loud and respectful. "You just said it's almost here." "Yeah. Are you coaxing the child?" The scene instantly became noisy. Ian held her backpack in her arms, lowered her head slightly, and looked anxious. Her footsteps unconsciously moved back, gradually moving further away from the noisy crowd. From time to time, cars whizzed past her, and the cool breeze swept by. She couldn't help but shiver several times. On the road, a black Rolls-Royce Phantom is particularly eye-catching. In the back seat, Bo Shaojin's calm eyes glanced out of the car window, his pupils narrowed slightly, only briefly, and his face returned to normal. "It's her. Bo Cheng's girlfriend. Blame him for having such a good memory. I only met him once, but I still have an impression." Assistant Lin, who was driving ahead, noticed the subtle atmosphere inside the car and asked curiously, "Mr. Bo, what's up?" "No." Bo Shaojin had already leaned back in his seat, closing the eyes of the cold stallion, making it difficult to guess his thoughts. Assistant Lin stopped speaking up and only thought about it himself. On that day, Ian arrived at the school dormitory only after 9 o'clock. After returning, I sent a message to Anne's mother to report her safety, and then dragged my tired body, washed up, and fell asleep. Life continues smoothly, and Ian enjoys this mundane and watery day. After class, Ian and Jiang Kiki made an appointment to go to the cafeteria for lunch together. On the way, Ian took out her phone and said, "Coco, go ahead and I'll call Mom." For some reason, she was always a little uneasy in class today. "Okay, then hurry up," Jiang Kiki sweetly smiled and readily agreed. Ian smiled back and nodded. On the school forest path, Ian's slender and stunning appearance attracted many people's attention. Especially for boys, their eyes may be stunning and admiring, but no one dares to disturb her. Her beauty is like a stunning fairy emerging from classical paintings, delicate and invincible, making one unable to tolerate profanity and can only be seen from a distance. Ian is completely unaware of her influence. As no one answered the phone, Ian's heart became increasingly anxious. On her third phone call, it rang 4 or 5 times but no one answered. Just as she was about to give up, the call was finally answered. "Mom, why haven't you answered for a long time?" Before Ian could finish speaking, he was interrupted by a male voice. "Hello, I'm not your mother." Ian's heart tightened and her whole body froze, not realizing that her words were trembling a bit. "May I ask who you are? How can you hold my mother's phone? Are you Ms. Ying's daughter?" "I am her attending physician." The doctor continued to say a lot, and Ian stood still, listening quietly. She felt her head buzzing, as if in a dream, whether it was real or not. I didn't hear her voice on the phone and shouted repeatedly before Ian regained consciousness. "Doctor. Student, I'll come over." Her voice showed a hint of forbearance, suppressing her crying voice. The doctor on the other side of the phone couldn't bear it, so he gave her the specific address and hospital bed number. After hanging up the phone, Ian was like a headless fly, looking at the several roads ahead with tears in her eyes. A handsome and tall boy unconsciously approached. "Classmate, what's wrong with you?" Sui Feng asked with concern on his face. Ian felt cold all over her body, and her mind kept echoing what the doctor had just said. Your mother has just completed the surgery and is not suitable to answer the phone now. I just finished the surgery. Surgery. Last time she came home, her mother's physical condition looked good. Why did she suddenly undergo surgery? Mom. Anine seemed to be living in her own world and didn't feel a boy standing beside her. She kept murmuring, Mom, Mom. Her face was full of fear and confusion. Her clear eyes were shrouded in a thin layer of mist, making her stunning face look even more lovable. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Introduction Object. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5 Introduction Object, Classmate, What Happened? Sui Feng quickly reached out to hold on to her slender arm as she looked heartbroken and unsteady. My mother is hospitalized, I need to go to the hospital, I need to go to the hospital. Anine lifted her head and looked at the stranger next to her with tearful eyes. She suppressed her tears and cried, not realizing that she was being grabbed by the other person's wrist. You tell me the address, I'll take you there, Sui Feng suggested without hesitation, looking at her sad face. Anine hurriedly reported the address. The two walked out of the campus. Sui Feng drove a car. In the back seat, two people sit side by side. Sui Feng felt sorry for her while her heart pounded wildly. From the moment she stepped into the campus, he began to pay attention to her every move, but never expected to be so close to her one day. He lowered his head and clenched his fists with 10 fingers to conceal his panic. Just now, his hand touched her wrist. She was so thin, her slender hands were soft and boneless, soft and alluring, making him reluctant to let go. The car is quiet inside. Sui Feng wanted to inquire about her situation, but in his spare time, he caught a glimpse of her secretly wiping tears while hugging her knees. When it came to her mouth, he held it back. At this moment, he took out his phone and took leave with the counselor. Also helped her take a leave of absence. If Anine were sober at this moment, she would definitely be curious that he actually knew her counselor. The car quickly arrived at the entrance of the city hospital, and Sui Feng paid. Anine's eyes were red and swollen, and she stumbled towards the hospital. Sui Feng was afraid of her falling, so he also followed closely. An. Sui Feng almost blurted out her name when he called her, classmate, slow down, don't fall. Anine seemed to have not heard. Their hurried expressions attracted many passers-by. Handsome men and beautiful women attract people's attention wherever they go. After entering the elevator, Sui Feng carefully protected her in the corner, his eyes always on her, watching her every move, afraid that she would suddenly faint. At this moment, An Yin's spirit looked very bad. Her originally fair face was devoid of blood, her whole body was tense, her eyes were hollow, like fragile porcelain dolls. Don't be afraid, everything will get better. Sui Feng leaned in her ear, trying to ease her nervousness. Anine still has no response. The elevator slowly ascended. There are two men standing near the innermost side. The powerful aura emanating from one of the men is hard to ignore. Assistant Lin glanced slightly at Mr. Bo next to him. It's still that thin and cold as ice, that's right. Why does he feel that today's Bo always gives people a more aloof feeling? Is it because the space inside the elevator is too narrow? Zhu Leng. Well, let's just look at the young couple in the corner. Seeing the boy's affectionate gaze fall on the girl, Assistant Lin sighed inwardly. Young is so good. And, this girl is really beautiful. Although she lowered her head and wept, she couldn't conceal her delicate appearance. Here we are. At this moment, Sui Feng spoke up. An Yin's eyes lit up, and as the elevator door slowly opened, she couldn't wait to get out. Be careful. Sui Feng grabbed her wrist and prevented her from acting impulsively. At the same time, a cold and deep gaze fell on An Yin's wrist, with the girl's thin wrist resting on the boy's finger, which was abrupt and intimate. Subsequently, the figures of An and Sui Feng disappeared. Soon, the elevator rose to the top floor, VIP level. "Mr. Bo, here we are," Assistant Lin reminded. Bo Shaojin did not respond, his lips pursed slightly, and his whole body showed a sense of indifference, giving people a sense of alienation. Just as he stepped out of the elevator, Assistant Lin seemed to hear a faint cold snort. That is contempt and disdain emanating from the nasal cavity. Assistant Lin looked up at his boss, unable to believe that it was his voice. "I must have hallucinated myself. It must be." In front of the top VIP ward door. Bo Shaojin stood in front of the door, but did not push the door in. "Mr. Bo." Assistant Lin stepped forward in fear and was about to help. "You go back first." Bo Shaojin's voice was deep and steady. "Okay." Assistant Lin dared not have any questions and silently left after answering. Bo Shaojin frowned slightly and stood indifferent. The originally diffused disinfection smell in the air was replaced by the slightly imperceptible smell of perfume. Just as he stood still, an old man in white walked towards him in the corridor. "Fu Lao," Bo Shaojin said. The old man is getting old, but his spirit is vigorous. Especially when he saw Bo Shaojin, his wrinkled face immediately relaxed and his voice couldn't help but increase a bit. "Ah Jean, since you're here, why are you still standing outside? Hurry up and go to the hospital room to see your grandmother. She's still waiting for you at the old age," he said. The old doctor's words were full of urging. "Grandma, how many blind dates are waiting for me?" Bo Shaojin retorted without answering. The old man, known as Fu Lao, was taken aback but did not show much surprise. The man in front of him is stirring the wind and rain in the business world, with a keen observation ability, and can easily see through the little tricks of Mrs. Bo. "Haha." Fu Lao concealed his embarrassment and said, "You haven't entered yet, how could you expect to introduce someone to you? Perfume tastes too strong." Bo Shaojin said bluntly. Cough. Really, Fu Lao is slandered. Besides, he also hates such heavy perfume, which has not yet disinfected the smell. "Fu Lao, if you cooperate with your grandmother to pretend to be sick next time, the future of the hospital will be worrying." Bo Shaojin's words were very plain and threatening. Little wolf, little wolf." Fu Lao pointed at him and cursed a few times before waving his hand. "I'm too lazy to bother with you." In order to donate money to the hospital every year for Mr. Bo, as the head of the hospital, Mr. Fu took a deep breath and left in disappointment. Immediately after, Bo Shaojin also turned around, taking steady steps and slowly leaving. The lonely and aloof figure gradually elongates in the corridor. Oncology monitoring room. The doctor gave a detailed account of An's mother's situation to An, and Sui Feng stood silently on the side, occasionally handing her a tissue to wipe her tears. An listened to the doctor's words and bit her lower lip tightly to prevent crying. After the doctor finished speaking, she trembled slightly and asked, "Can my mother's illness be cured?" Anyone who hears the word cancer will have an incurable disease as their first reaction. An is no exception. The doctor looked at the young girl in front of him and could not bear to say the most dangerous situation. He could only appease her, "You should trust the current medical skills, and the cure rate of early breast cancer is quite high." The doctor's words gave An hope. "Thank you, doctor." An expressed sincere gratitude. Next, the doctor also gave some advice, and An pretended to be calm while listening. Looking at Sui Feng's eyes on the side, she only felt heartbroken. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. After the surgery, An's mother stayed in the intensive care unit, still under anesthesia and feeling groggy. Under the guidance of the attending doctor, An went in to visit for a few minutes before coming out. A few days without seeing each other, An watched as her mother had lost a lot of weight and her whole body was visibly haggard. Leaving the intensive care unit, she leaned against the wall, curled up in a ball, and sobs kept coming from her mouth. Sui Feng silently squatted beside her. "Don't cry, Auntie doesn't want to see you sad," Sui Feng said in a slightly awkward voice. Seeing her tearful appearance, Sui Feng felt both anxious and heartbroken. Time passes by bit by bit. They stood out in the hallway, with passers-by looking sideways. Buzzing. Sui Feng noticed that her phone was occasionally ringing. Seeing her indifferent, Sui Feng couldn't help but remind her, "The phone keeps ringing, maybe someone else is looking for you for something urgent." He didn't dare to speak too loudly, afraid of scaring her. Due to squatting for a long time, Anine only felt her legs numb, and the crisp voice of the boy could be heard in her ears. She slowly looked up. A tearful pear-blossom face fell into Sui Feng's eyes, and he could feel his heart thumping and trembling. Under her teary gaze, Sui Feng felt very dry all over. Answer the phone." Sui Feng even spoke vaguely. Even he didn't notice, and the tip of his ear and neck turned red in the moment she looked over, especially the tip of his ear. Anine heard his words and calmly took out her phone. At the same time, the phone screen went out and the other person hung up. Anine flipped through it. It was Jiang Keek's phone number. More than 10 missed calls. "I suddenly left when I remembered having dinner with her before." Anine opened WeChat and edited a text message to send. "Handle this matter well." Anine wiped away the remaining tears on her cheeks with her slender fingers, and looked at the boy beside her with clear eyes. She can't recall seeing him at all. Sui Feng saw him looking at him in confusion and quickly introduced himself. "Hello, my name is Sui Feng. I am currently in my senior year, studying finance." "Hello, my name is Anine." Anine spoke up after realizing it, her voice a bit hoarse and timid. "Thank you for bringing me to the hospital." "You're welcome," Sui Feng answered eagerly. When he realized it, he quickly reached out a hand and pretended to scratch his head to cover up his embarrassment. The atmosphere between the two was very eerie, and neither of them spoke. Seeing her drooping her head and looking dejected again, Sui Feng cautiously spoke up, "There are seats in front, let's go sit for a while." Anine heard his words and her eyes slightly turned. Seeing him crouching with her, she felt quite embarrassed and said, Sui Feng stood up first when she agreed. Even though her feet were numb and painful, she endured it and passed away. Anine slowly stood up while supporting the wall, while Sui Feng beside her resisted the urge to go and help her. In her eyes, the two of them were strangers, and if she rashly got close, it might provoke her resentment. Sui Feng dared not act rashly. For the next few days, Anine will stay in the hospital. Since Anne's mother was transferred to a regular ward, taking care of Anne's mother has always been done by Anine herself. During this period, Sui Feng occasionally brought fruits and meals, which made Anne's mother hesitant to look at her daughter several times. Jiang Kiki also visited Anne's mother once, chatted for a while, and then left. In the ordinary ward, there are 4 patients living, and family members occasionally come in, making it very crowded. However, there is a cloth curtain between the patients, which can also avoid some unnecessary awkwardness. Anne's mother is lying on the hospital bed, with intravenous fluids on the back of her hands. Her eyes are filled with love as she looks at her daughter. At this moment, Anine was sitting on a stool, with both hands lying on the edge of the hospital bed, her head resting on it. She was sleeping soundly, and the noise around her did not wake her up. Her eyes were dark, indicating that she had not slept well these past few days. "It's all because of my poor health," Anine thought with self-blame. Meanwhile, the TV hanging on the opposite wall is broadcasting a financial channel. On the screen, the female host is interviewing a middle-aged man wearing a black coat. He just sits quietly next to the host, exuding a sense of luxury all over his body. The host joked that although he was in his 40s, he looked very young. After a few pleasantries, he began to introduce his business map. Anine listened very attentively. Mizzen, please don't exert any force, your needle has already returned to blood. The arrival of the nurse interrupted Ying's thoughts. Sorry, Aning averted her gaze from the TV, with a slight hint of sadness in her eyes that was hard to detect. Aning looked at her hand. Unconsciously, she clenched her fists, and the veins on the back of her hands were faintly visible. She glanced at the TV imperceptibly, and the man sitting next to the host had disappeared. It looks great. Time seems to have left no trace on him. Gradually, Aning fell into her own thoughts. Mizzen, all of your potions have been dripped today, and I will help you remove the needle now. The nurse noticed that she was absent-minded and had been staring at the TV, mesmerized. She couldn't help but remind her, you need to rest more now. It's better not to watch TV for too long. The nurse's voice was a bit loud, and Aning nodded in shame, okay. The nurse heard her and went to another patient's place. As the nurse left, the worried expression on Ying's face did not diminish, but she focused all her attention on Ying's face. Just then, a familiar voice came in. Anton. Sui Feng's tall and handsome figure appeared in the ward. As soon as he appeared, the other patients in the ward came over one after another, which made Sui Feng very embarrassed. Xiao Su is here. Aning didn't feel any strange when she saw him coming. These days, every day before he left, Aning reminded him not to always run here, and he didn't listen. Hey, young people. Even if Aning is foolish, he knows what he is thinking in his heart. Emotions are a matter for young people themselves, and Aning doesn't want to interfere too much with her daughter in this matter. Who hasn't been young before? Aning is asleep, Sui Feng said softly as he walked into the ward and saw Aning sleeping on her stomach. These days are too tiring, let her sleep for a while. Aning couldn't help but wake up her daughter and replied. Her voice is soft and comfortable to listen to. From the first time Sui Feng saw Yin's mother, his eyes showed a stunning expression. Later, he thought, how could it be ordinary to have a daughter as beautiful as Aning? However, he never expected Yin's mother to be so stunning. That is a unique classical beauty of Jiangnan women. Delicate, gentle, and immortal. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Naivety. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7 Naivety. Sui Feng noticed that he had been staring at his elders and quickly lowered his head, looking shy. He is holding fruits and boxed meals in his hand. Why are you carrying so many things again? Aning looked helpless. It's not related, especially since the other party is still a student. It's really embarrassing to keep the other party spending money. Anton, these fruits are very cheap, Sui Feng answered with a smile. Between the words, it makes people feel that it is only natural for him to come and buy things. Aning was momentarily speechless. I mentioned before that no matter how much I tried to persuade him, he wouldn't listen anyway. It's just that. When she is discharged from the hospital, I will convert the money he spent on shopping into cash and return it to him. Sui Feng saw that she stopped talking and skillfully walked to the bedside table. He reached out and opened it, looking at the dazzling array of fruits inside. After a moment of confusion, Sui Feng's face slightly warmed. Have you bought so many fruits these days? Looking at the fruits in his hand that had nowhere to place them, Sui Feng reluctantly squeezed the fruits inside together. Aning turned her head and looked at his slightly shy expression, with a peaceful smile slowly appearing at the corner of her mouth. What a silly child. But simple. When Aning opened her sleepy eyes, the handsome and straight figure of the boy caught her eye. He's here again. As Aning woke up, Sui Feng also looked over. Aning, who had just woken up, blushed with rosy cheeks and a pair of sparkling eyes blinking, cute and adorable. Senior, Aning hesitated. Since Sui Feng brought her to the hospital to see her mother that day, Yin's attitude towards him has been very friendly. Sui Feng met her eyes, nodded, and said hello, come and have dinner. After Sui Feng finished speaking, he stepped forward and handed her another dinner. Anine looked at the boxed lunch in front of her and slowly took it. Thank you, thank you. Eat quickly, if it gets cold, it won't taste good, urged Sui Feng. Oh, Anine nodded vaguely and glanced at her mother, realizing that she was staring at her. Anine quickly lowered her head, her cheeks slightly red, and she looked very embarrassed. Anine didn't know why she felt guilty. To conceal her embarrassment, Anine hesitated and asked, Mom, have you finished eating? I just finished eating. Anine nodded. She has a bad appetite and only drinks a little congee. Oh. Hurry up and eat, don't worry about me, Anine looked at her daughter and said with heartache. Anine obediently started eating. Sui Feng stood aside to collect the leftover congee. Senior, I'll just do these things later. Could you please? Anine eagerly swallowed the rice in her mouth, speaking vaguely. I'm fine even when I'm standing, activities are just like exercising, Sui Feng stared at her with clear eyes. Exercise this. Anine was speechless and couldn't think of any counterarguments. Anine lay on the hospital bed, laughing softly. Ha! Sui Feng also realized that what he said was very far-fetched, with an embarrassed expression on his face, so he used the excuse of throwing garbage and quickly walked out. After Sui Feng left, Anine only felt a gaze fall on her face. She slowly looked up and saw her mother looking at her with an interested expression. Mom, why are you looking at me like this? Anine couldn't help but ask while taking a small bite to eat. What do you think? Anine left the problem to her daughter. Anine. Anine continued to eat silently. Xiao Su is a good child. Anine said something inexplicably. Anine pretended not to hear and continued to work. Anine saw that her daughter had no reaction and did not say much. My daughter has been sensitive since childhood, and just because someone doesn't say something doesn't mean she doesn't know. I will be discharged in 2 days, and you can go to class from tomorrow, Anine said with a hint of persistence. But I want to spend more time with you, Anine immediately retorted. As soon as she thinks of her mother lying in the intensive care unit after undergoing surgery, her heart beats with pain. Mom is as important to her as her life. Education is important, Mom is fine. Anine doesn't want her daughter to focus all her attention on herself, fearing it will delay her daughter's studies. The doctors have all said that there is still follow-up treatment for your illness, Anine shouted solemnly, interrupting her daughter's next words. The doctor also said that Mom has a high cure rate for this disease, and she can handle the treatment alone. If you are really worried, Mom always reports to you every time she comes to the hospital and tells you if you feel uncomfortable, okay? However, she still felt uneasy. Anine lowered her head, with red eyes, not wanting her mother to see Wei Chu Baba's self. You stay by my side every day, which actually makes me worry about your studies and makes my mother feel uncomfortable, Anine understood her daughter and could only console her in a different way. Mom, Anine felt that the food in her mouth was not fragrant anymore, and said astringently, I'm obedient. I'll go to school tomorrow. I'm just being good. Although she couldn't bear to part with her daughter, Anine still said something against her heart. When Sui Feng came in, he felt the atmosphere was heavy. Seeing that neither of them spoke, Sui Feng dared not ask any more questions. After a few scattered conversations, Sui Feng wisely prepared to leave. Anine suggested seeing him out of the hospital gate. Sui Feng was delighted to see that she rarely took the initiative, and the happiness on her face was beyond words. Anine calmly observed the interaction between the two. After greeting Sui Feng, she watched their tall and short backs gradually disappear into the hospital room. Anying's gaze gradually blurred and she fell into some kind of imagination. Sui Feng and Anine walked side by side. Most of the time, Sui Feng spoke and Anine listened silently, occasionally uttering a few words. The two walked into the elevator. Anine habitually stood aside, while Sui Feng stood by her side like a bird guarding her, staring at her profile with bright eyes. Her profile is exquisitely defined, with a pointed nose and long eyelashes flickering, as if scratching his heart, making her itch instantly. On the other side of the elevator, Bo Shaojin stood straight, his cold eyes as cold as ice-covered water. Is it her again? The boys around her have not changed either. Bo Shaojin's dark eyes lingered on them for only 3 seconds before moving away. His aura is too oppressive. On the side, Sui Feng turned his head and met the eyes of a pair of Yin stallions, feeling horrified. He quickly turned his head and even slightly moved his steps to prevent the man beside him from looking at an Yin. For some reason, at this moment, he really wanted to hide an Yin and not let anyone reveal her beauty. Sui Feng only dared to think about this dark thought. Bo Shaojin clearly felt the other party's guard and even prevented himself from seeing her, sneering not ordinary childishness. Moreover, the girl looked delicate and didn't expect her to be quite playful. There is his little cousin hanging over there, and it's still hot playing with the little boy here. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Small Pattern. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The source has no content or has errors. Chapter 9. Lying Flat. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Lying Flat, a luxury goods store in the city center mall. Bo Cheng led Jiang Kiki to the front before entering the door. A beautiful-looking clerk came to Bo Cheng's side and said, "Mr. Bo." Without lifting his eyelids, Bo Cheng ordered, "Take them to choose a set of clothes." Jiang Kiki walked into this store and realized what compensation Bo Cheng had meant before. "So you're taking them to buy clothes?" Looking at this store, every item exudes an elegant and luxurious atmosphere. While Jiang Kiki is excited, he is more anxious. "Okay," the shop assistant nodded respectfully at Bo Cheng and then looked at Jiang Kiki and Anin, politely saying, "Please come with me, both of you." Jiang Kiki's cheeks turned slightly red, and he smiled at Bo Cheng before taking a step up. Upon seeing this, Anin stood still and muttered, "I don't need it anymore." Before Bo Cheng could answer, Jiang Kiki quickly took her hand and said, "How can we not? Look at you, your clothes and pants are so wet. Let's go." The air conditioning was turned on in the store, and I stood at the warm air vent to blow it. It quickly dried up, and Anin said quickly, her mind spinning. Anin insisted, but Jiang Kiki had no choice but to look at Bo Cheng and said, "Look at her." Jiang Kiki's voice was delicate and charming in Bo Cheng's ears. "Anin, it's just a suit of clothes, go and choose." Bo Chengshuang quickly spoke up. This tone of wealth and generosity. Anin suppressed the discomfort in her heart and pulled a forced smile, "It's really not necessary, Coco, you go pick it." Bo Cheng and Anin appears to have a soft and fluffy personality, with a strong sense of principle. Jiang was afraid that if he continued to force himself, it would have the opposite effect. He looked dejected and let out an "oh." He immediately followed the salesperson behind him, picking clothes. Anin picked a warm place and pounded the wet one. Bo Cheng walked to the sofa at some point, sat down, lazily playing with his phone. In no time, Jiang Kiki, wearing a pink suspender miniskirt, lowered his head and twisted his steps as he approached Bo Cheng. "Ah Cheng, what do you think of this dress?" Jiang Kiki's coquettishness was evident as he spoke. Bo Cheng was playing a game when suddenly a soft voice came from him. He quickly lifted his head and his gaze became complicated in an instant. "Ah Cheng." Until Jiang Kiki's urging sounded, Bo Cheng's Adam's apple rolled and he calmed down his restlessness. However, his words were hoarse, "Okay, it looks good." Jiang Kiki received a positive answer from the other party, and his heart was overjoyed. He hesitated and continued, "There are still a few sets there. I'll try to show you and help me choose the most beautiful one." After that, Jiang Kiki turned around and left. Bo Cheng stared at her graceful figure, his eyes tinted with a rich color. More than half an hour later, Bo Cheng bought all the clothes that Jiang Kiki had tried. As he walked out of the mall, Jiang Kiki still muttered, "Ah Cheng, you've bought too much. Bo Cheng placed one hand on her shoulder, vigorously pushing her towards his arms, lowered his head, and whispered, "Tonight, show me one piece at a time." He lowered his voice, and the conversation was only heard by the two of them. Jiang Qi's face gradually turned red. Cheng, how could you be so bad?" After she finished speaking, she broke free from her arms and ran to An Yin's side in small steps, trying to pretend as if nothing had happened. An Yin tried to ignore their flirting and did not comment on the relationship between her friend and Bo Cheng, as it was their private matter. However, Bo Cheng's occasional display of carefree and unrestrained demeanor made An Yin feel very disgusted. An Yin dared not tell Jiang Qi these words. She could tell that Jiang Qi liked him very much. An Yin hopes that Bo Cheng can take Jiang Qi seriously. After the three of them boarded the car again, Jiang Qi couldn't help but ask, "Where are we going?" "I'll know later." Bo Cheng drove the car, selling the tricks. Jiang Qi snorted a few times, but didn't ask much. He chatted with An Yin on his own, although most of the time it was Jiang Qi speaking. An Yin always had an absent-minded expression. After catching a glimpse, Jiang Qi said, "It's rare for us to come out and play once. Don't think nonsense, Anton will definitely take care of herself." An Yin nodded. Jiang Qi didn't know that An Yin had been worried about Anton, and then she comforted her a few more words. An Yin's gloomy mood dissipated quite a bit. Bo Cheng's car was parked in the center of the city, surrounded by towering buildings. From a distance, there were all sales caves. Soon, a parking man came over and helped Bo Cheng park the car. "Let's go, take you to see my new club." Bo Cheng turned around, looking proud, with a hint of pride in his words. Jiang Qi's eyes lit up and he said, "Is it a bar?" "It's also considered a bar." Bo Cheng nodded and hugged his girlfriend's waist, leading her towards the direction of the bar. "It happened to open on my birthday, to seek good luck. Let's go and take you to see." Jiang Qi allowed Bo Cheng to drape his waist and took a few steps before realizing that his good friend had not kept up. "Yin." Jiang Qi turned his head and urged his friend behind him, "Let's go." I welcomed Jiang Qi's sparkling eyes, and An Yin didn't want to ruin her mood, let alone today is Bo Cheng's birthday. An Yin nodded and followed behind them. Lie Flat Club. Jiang Qi looked at the name of the club and did not express any opinion. An Yin hesitated and slightly raised the corner of her mouth. This name quite fits the style of this wealthy young master. The newly opened club by Bo Cheng has invested a lot of money, providing a complete range of dining, drinking, and entertainment options. It is a well-equipped high-end consumption venue and an elegant venue for elite entertainment. An Yin stepped into this club and couldn't help but look around as her eyes wandered. Stepping on the soft and precious blankets under her feet, whether it's indoor decorations, wall paintings, or various entertainment bars, An Yin couldn't help but marvel at the real difference between people. As Bo Cheng stepped into the door, the manager of the club greeted them confidently, leading them to a VIP private room, and then wisely retreated. The private room was very large, and as soon as I entered, there was a loud noise coming from inside. "Oh, our young master Bo neglected us. It turned out he was just picking up the beautiful woman. Haha, the guy who forgets his meaning when he sees color, you kid, you'll have to punish yourself with 3 cups. Hurry up. 3 cups. Drink, drink." The indoor lights flickered, and there were more than 10 people, both men and women, with cheers echoing one after another. Upon seeing this, Bo Cheng turned around and looked at the 2 people behind him. "Please sit down for a while, they are very crazy. Don't scare you, I will come as soon as I go." After Bo Cheng finished speaking, a waiter quickly walked over. "Get them something to eat," Bo Cheng instructed the waiter. "Okay, Mr. Bo," the waiter replied with a smile. Then Bo Cheng stepped left. The waiter led them to a spacious corner. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Sister.in.law. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10 Sister.in.law. Jiang Kiki and Anin, led by the waiter, arrived at a corner and sat down, feeling a bit flustered in their hearts. Although Jiang Kiki is Bo Cheng's girlfriend, she has never met his friend before. This is the first time she has integrated into Bo Cheng's circle of friends, which makes her very nervous. After all, people in Bo Cheng's circle are either rich or noble. For Jiang Kiki, they are people standing at the top of the pyramid. Quickly, the waiter brought desserts, fruit wine, and various delicate snacks. Neither of them had dinner, so they were a bit hungry at the moment. Jiang Kiki glanced at the distance and saw Bo Cheng and his friends getting together, feeling a bit disappointed. He picked up a beautifully colored drink and took a light sip. This one tastes good." Jiang Kiki's eyes lit up and he exclaimed in surprise. There is a delicate fruit flavor in the mouth. In Jiang's cognition, this is the fruit juice. Anin watched her friend take a few more sips and nodded anxiously. Since stepping into the private room, she has been feeling uneasy all over. From childhood to adulthood, Anyin's life has always been routine. She has never been to places like KTV and bars, and occasionally hears others mention them, always thinking that these places are not serious. She only gained a new understanding when she grew up. Not all entertainment venues are dangerous. Just as Anin remained silent and nervous, Jiang Kiki picked up a small cake and said, taste it." Anin couldn't bear to refuse her kindness. Just as he was about to take the cake, the door of the private room was pushed open by someone. Then, a pair of slender feet walked in leisurely, giving the impression of a handsome and charming man from a distance. Anin and Jiang Kiki sat in the corner, with slightly dim lights. If they didn't look carefully, others wouldn't even notice them. After the man entered the door, he walked straight towards the group of wealthy young masters. After the man entered, everyone put down their glasses and stopped making noise. "Brother you! Brother you! Brother you!" The men and women gathered together suddenly stood obediently, and when they called out their names, they were very respectful, indicating that the man known as Yu Gu had a good status. "Don't worry, everyone. You should eat and drink." Lin Yu curled his lips and glanced at these brats. His gaze fell on Bo Cheng and he continued, Cheng, the new store is pretty good, work hard. Seems like an elder. Thank you for Brother Yu's praise." Bo Cheng heard his words and a smile appeared in his eyes. Then he tentatively looked behind Lin Yu with a hint of hesitation. "My brother, is he also here?" When Bo Cheng said, "brother," Lin Yu naturally knew who he was referring to. Bo Shaojin. Only Bo Shaojin can give people an invisible sense of oppression in the Bo family, making people pale at the sound of fame. "In the private room next to me," Lin Yu replied in a flat tone. Bo Cheng's face lit up with joy, and he was about to say hello when he was stopped by Lin Yu. "You're busy," he said. Bo Cheng's smile froze and he didn't ask much. He nodded and said, "Okay, then you and my brother have a good time playing." Lin Yu said lightly, "Your brother said that he paid for all the expenses in the store today." "Okay, thank you for me, brother." Bo Cheng didn't delay either. As long as Bo Shaojin can appear here, it will already give him great face, and Bo Cheng is very clear about this. And his club, due to the appearance of Bo Shaojin, will bring many invisible benefits, which Bo Cheng, as a member of the Bo family, knows very well. "You continue," Lin Yu said as he looked at the crowd. A few of them drank too much and boldly shouted, "Brother Yu, take your time." Lin Yu always smiled, nodded, and as he turned around to leave, he caught a glimpse of a petite figure in the corner. Due to the lighting, Lin Yu didn't see very clearly, and he didn't care either. He only regarded the figure as his female companion. In the corner, Anin dared not venture out. Just now, a man not far away was looking towards them, his eyes full of exploration. Fortunately, the other person quickly left the private room. Although they didn't know each other, Anin was not used to looking at others. The private room on the other side. Lin Yu felt a chill as soon as he stepped into the private room. With a shiver all over his body, he sneered at the man sitting in the center of the sofa. It's better to be young. That group of young people just now had such fun playing. Look at the atmosphere in their private room, it's even more dull than an elderly gathering. Lin Yu spoke with a hint of melancholy both inside and outside, then walked to the bar in the corner, picked up his glass, and drank it all in one gulp. Are you sure you like young people? Bo Shaojin's dark eyes were plain and profound, and his words were extremely lethal, especially the last 3 words. Sure enough, when Lin Yu heard his words, he felt like a thorn in his throat. The person who stabs oneself in the back must be the one who knows oneself the best. Only a few people know the secret hidden by Lin Yu. Unfortunately, Bo Shaojin is one of them. After only a moment of silence, Lin Yu asked his doubts and said, "Why did you let me step forward when you were holding up your cousin?" Noisy. Bo Shaojin casually draped his arm over the back of the sofa, his tone tired. Lin Yu understood. This is because he disliked those naughty kids for being too noisy, so he asked himself to show his face. Lin Yu didn't care and frowned. "Ah Cheng, opening a club is also worth your personal support. It's not like your style." People in their circle, who run clubs, not only have Bo Cheng, but they also don't usually see their friends show up. If something goes wrong, there must be a demon. Lin Yu leaned back against the wall, holding a cigarette in his hand. He quickly lit it and swallowed the clouds, casting his gaze on the man across from him. Bo Shaojin didn't speak and was holding a cigarette in his hand, but he didn't smoke it. The cigarette but slowly burned out until his fingertips vaguely felt it burning hot, before he picked it up and threw it into the ashtray. The two have known each other for many years, but Lin Yu can never see through his friends. When he wanted to say something more, his phone heard a buzzing vibration. Lin Yu took out his phone and caught a glimpse of the words sister.in.law on the screen. His once playful face suddenly darkened. As he answered the phone, he immediately turned his back and spoke in an indescribable tone of unease and softness. At this moment, Bo Shaojin raised his eyes and looked at Lin Yu's pretentious appearance, his face full of disdain. In less than a minute, Bo Shaojin saw Lin Yu hang up the phone. Cough, cough. Lin Yu pretended to cough, concealing his embarrassment. "I have something to do, let's take a step first." Bo Shaojin's deep eyes met him. Lin Yu lowered his head with a guilty heart and strode towards the door. His hand just touched the door of the private room, and a casual voice came from behind. "The phone number, young man, gave you." Lin Yu's face turned black as he slammed the door and left. What kind of friends did he make? Pick on others and poke their hearts. Still a person. Breaking up, we must break up. The huge private room was unusually quiet as Lin Yu left. End of this chapter.